1948, a yellow school bus carrying 42 native kids vanished in a Minnesota blizzarder, so they said. Decades later, a Sonar crew finds it buried under Lake Heron, frozen in time, with a chilling message scratched on the window. We didn't want to go. What secrets did the ice hide? Who wanted those kids gone? This story, though fictional, is inspired by real histories of injustice, crafted to educate and enthrall. Stick with us to unravel a conspiracy that'll keep you glued to the screen until the shocking truth breaks free. The wind howled across Lake Heron, cutting through the pines like a blade. It was January 1995, and the temperature had plunged to 10 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Snow crusted the shore, glinting under a pale sun that barely warmed the air. A state sonar crew huddled in their boat, breath fogging as they scanned the lake's depths for a hydropower survey. Routine work. Boring work. Until the screen flickered with something that wasn't supposed to be there. Greg Hollander, the lead sonar tech, squinted at the grainy display. His gloved fingers adjusted the dials, sharpening the image. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. The screen showed a boxy shape, too clean and angular to be a rock or a sunken log. It sat 70 feet down, nestled in sediment, perfectly preserved under the ice. The crew went quiet, their eyes locked on the monitor. "Looks like a bus," said Mike, the youngest guy on the team, his voice cracking. He leaned closer, his parka rustling. "A damn school bus." Greg's stomach twisted. He zoomed in, the sonar pinging softly. The outline grew clearer, long, rounded edges, the unmistakable shape of a yellow school bus, the kind that hauled kids to class in the 40s and 50s. But what chilled him wasn't the bus itself, it was the shadows inside. Small shapes, still and silent, like they were waiting for something. "No way," Greg whispered. "No damn way." "Could be an old wreck," Mike said, but his voice wavered, like he didn't believe it himself. "Maybe a fishing boat?" Greg shook his head. "That ain't no boat. Look at the seats, the windows." He pointed at the screen, where faint rectangles lined the sides. "That's a bus, and it's full of something." The crew didn't speak for a long moment. The wind screamed louder, rattling the boat. Greg grabbed the radio, his hand shaking. "Base, this is Heron 1. We got something down here. You're gonna want to send divers. Now." By dawn, Lake Heron was a different place. Yellow police tape, fluttered in the wind, strung between pines along the shore. A temporary ops tent went up, its canvas flapping like a trapped bird. State troopers, forensic teams, and a handful of local reporters crowded the area, their boots crunching through snow. The air buzzed with tension, like the lake itself was holding its breath. Nia Whitaker stood at the edge of the chaos, her notebook clutched tight. She was 28, a reporter for the Duluth Chronicle, with sharp eyes and a stubborn streak that had gotten her in trouble more than once. Her Ojibwe roots ran deep, tied to the Red Pines Reservation just 30 miles away. She'd been chasing stories about the old Indian boarding schools for months, digging into whispers of lost kids and buried secrets. When she got the tip about Lake Heron, she'd driven through the night, her beat-up Ford rattling over icy back roads. Something told her this wasn't just another story. She watched as divers suited up, their gear clanking in the cold. The head diver, a grizzled guy named Carl, barked orders. "Water's like concrete down there," he said. 7 feet of ice, then 70 feet of black. "We're gonna need the heavy drills." Nia edged closer, catching snippets of conversation. A trooper muttered about old rumors from the 40s, something about a missing bus from St. Nicholas Indian boarding school. She jotted it down, her pen scratching fast. St. Nicholas, she knew the name. A grim place, one of those schools where native kids were sent to be civilized, stripped of their language, their culture, their names. Her own grandmother had stories about it, told in hushed tones over late-night coffee. Stories of kids who never came home. "Hey." A trooper spotted her, his face red from the cold. "Press stays back. This is a restricted area." "I'm just observing," Nia said, holding up her badge. Duluth Chronicle. "What's going on down there?" The trooper hesitated, glancing at the lake. We don't know yet. Something big. That's all you get. Nia didn't push. She'd learned long ago that cops clammed up when you got too nosy. Instead, she slipped toward the ops tent, where a small crowd of locals had gathered. Among them was Mabel Blackrow, 65 years old, her gray braid tucked under a wool cap. Mabel's face was lined with grief, but her eyes burned with something fierce. Nia knew her from the reservation she'd interviewed her last month about her sister, Elise, who'd vanished in 1948. One of the kids who never came back from St. Nicholas. Nia, Mabel said, her voice low, almost lost in the wind. Is it true? They found something? Nia nodded, keeping her voice soft. A bus, Mabel, under the lake. They're saying it's old, maybe from the 40s. Mabel's hand tightened on her cane. Elise was on a bus, spring of 48. They said it crashed in a storm, but her voice broke, and she looked away, toward the lake. They never looked for her, never even tried. Nia put a hand on Mabel's arm. I'm gonna find out what happened, I promise. Mabel's eyes met hers, sharp and searching. Be careful, girl. Some truths don't want to be found. The divers went down at noon, their drills roaring through the ice. Hours passed, the sun sinking low, casting long shadows across the snow. Nia stayed, her boots soaked, her fingers numb. She sketched the scene in her notebook, the tent, the cops, the divers' lines disappearing into a hole in the ice. Finally, just before dusk, a shout went up. We got it. It's coming up. A crane groaned, pulling cables taut. The crowd held its breath as the water churned, spitting chunks of ice. Then it surfaced a school bus, its yellow paint faded to a sickly green, crusted with sediment. The windows were intact, fogged with time, but through one, Nia caught a glimpse of something that made her chest tighten. Small shapes, slumped in seats, still wearing tattered wool coats. Kids. Oh God, someone whispered. A cop turned away, his face pale. Mabel clutched Nia's arm, her breath ragged. The divers climbed out, their faces grim. Carl, the head diver, peeled off his mask and staggered to the ops tent. It's a tomb, he said, his voice shaking. They're all in there, kids, maybe 40 of them. Nia pushed forward, ignoring the trooper trying to wave her back. What else did you see? She demanded. Carl looked at her, his eyes haunted. One of the windows, there's writing on it, scratched, like with a nail, says, we didn't want to go. Nia's blood ran cold. She scribbled the words, her hand trembling. Mabel let out a choked sob. Elise, she whispered. That's her. She loved to write things, always carving her name into stuff. The cops sealed off the bus, draping it with tarps. Forensic teams swarmed in, their cameras flashing like lightning. Nia caught glimpses of what they pulled out. A rusted lunchbox, a broken hair clip, a child's mitten frozen stiff, its fingers curled like it was still holding something. And then, from under a seat, a diver lifted a small metal box, no bigger than a cigar case. It was locked, crusted with rust, but intact. Open it, Nia said, her voice sharper than she meant. The cop holding it hesitated, then pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a notebook, its pages damp but legible. Childish handwriting filled the first page, uneven and smudged. Nia leaned in, reading over the cop's shoulder. Sister B came last night. She was crying. Said we had to go to the lake. Said we couldn't tell anyone. The cop snapped the box shut. This is evidence, he said, glaring at Nia. Back off. But Nia had seen enough. Sister B. She didn't know who that was, but the name burned in her mind. She turned to Mabel, who was staring at the bus, her face a mask of pain and fury. Mabel, who's Sister B? Mabel's lips trembled. Bernardine, Sister Bernardine St. Clair. She ran St. Nicholas, cold as ice, that woman. Elise was scared of her. Nia's mind raced. She'd heard of Bernardine before, in old articles about the school, a nun who'd vanished not long after the bus went missing. No goodbye, no record, just gone. Like the kids. By nightfall, the story was spreading. News vans rolled in from Minneapolis, their lights cutting through the dark. Reporters shouted questions, but the cops gave them nothing. Nia stayed late, watching the forensic team catalog bones and artifacts under floodlights. She overheard one tech whisper to another. 42 kids, all native. This wasn't an accident. Nia drove to the Red Pines Reservation, her headlights bouncing over rutted roads. Mabel's trailer was at the edge of North Creek, a small place with a sagging porch. Inside, the walls were covered with photoskids in stiff uniforms, unsmiling, their eyes heavy with something Nia recognized. Fear. At the center was a black and white shot of two girls. One was Mabel, maybe 12, her arm around a smaller girl with braids and a shy smile. Elise. Mabel sat at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee gone cold in her hands. She was 9, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Loved birds. Used to carve little ones out of cedar bark. Said they'd fly her home one day. Her fingers trembled, brushing the photo. I told her to be brave. I told her it was just a trip. Nia sat across from her, notebook open but untouched. What happened that day, Mabel? What do you remember? Mabel's eyes drifted to the window, where the night pressed close. It was April, 1948. They said it was a reward trip, a spring festival in St. Allen. The kids were excited, didn't get out much. The school was hard. No talking Ojibwe, no singing our songs. They'd whip you for it. She paused, her jaw tight. Elise got on that bus, waving at me. I can still see her face pressed to the glass. Then they drove off, and nothing. No crash, no search. Just a priest at our door, saying to pray and move on. Nia leaned forward. Who was driving? Walter Broom, Mabel said. Quiet guy, kept to himself. School said he died in the crash, but they never showed us a body. Nia wrote the name down, her pen digging into the paper. Walter Broom, Sister Bernardine. A bus full of kids, sunk in a lake for 47 years. This wasn't a crash. This was something else. Something deliberate. Mabel, Nia said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. I'm gonna dig into this. Whatever happened, I'll find it. Mabel's eyes locked onto hers, fierce and unyielding. You do that, Nia, but watch your back. Folks around here, they don't like old ghosts being stirred. Nia left the trailer, the cold biting at her face. She drove back to Duluth, her mind churning. The notebook from the bus kept flashing in her head, those words, written by a kid who knew something was wrong. She pulled into a gas station, the neon sign buzzing overhead. As she filled her tank, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? She said, her voice cautious. Static crackled, then a low voice, distorted, like it was coming through a bad filter. Stop digging, Whitaker. You won't like what you find. Her heart pounded. Who is this? The line went dead. She stood there, the pump clicking in the silence. A shadow moved at the edge of the lot, just beyond the light. She squinted, but it was gone. Maybe nothing. Maybe her imagination. But as she got back in her car, she noticed something on the passenger seat. A small cedar bird, crudely carved, its wings spread like it was about to fly. Nia's breath caught. She hadn't put it there. She locked the doors, her hands shaking, and floored it back to town. The bird sat on the seat, staring at her like it knew something she didn't. The next morning, Nia hit the Duluth Historical Society, a squat brick building stuffed with dusty records. The librarian, a wiry woman named Ruth, eyed her curiously as she hauled out boxes of microfilm. You're chasing that bus story, aren't you? Ruth asked, her voice sharp with interest. Nia nodded, keeping it vague, just following a lead. Ruth smirked. Good luck. Those old boarding school records? Half of them are missing. Convenient, huh? Nia spent hours scrolling through grainy scanned school rosters, church logs, local papers from 1948. She found a single article, buried on page 12 of the Windridge Gazette, dated April 15th. School bus missing in storm, it said. 42 native children from St. Nicholas Indian Boarding School, presumed lost in a snowstorm en route to St. Allen. Search efforts ongoing. That was it. No follow-up. No names. Like the kids had never existed. She dug deeper, finding a class roster from St. Nicholas. Elise Blackcrow, age 9. Timothy Redfeather, age 12. 40 other names, all native, all erased from the official county records. But one thing stood out, a handwritten note in the margin, barely legible. Bus route altered. Special permission, B.S. Nia froze. B.S. Bernardine St. Clair? She jotted it down, her pulse racing. She needed more. She needed to know why that bus went to the lake, who gave the order, and why nobody looked for those kids. As she left the library, the sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She answered, her voice sharp. Who's this? The same distorted voice. You're asking questions you shouldn't. That lake's got more secrets than you can handle. Nia gripped the phone. If you're trying to scare me, it's not working. A low chuckle. We'll see. The line cut out. Nia stood in the parking lot, her breath fogging in the cold. The cedar bird was still in her car, its eyes carved deep, like it was watching her. She didn't know who was behind the calls, but one thing was clear, someone didn't want her digging. And that only made her want to dig harder. Nia Whitaker's boots crunched through the snow as she pulled into the Red Pines reservation, the cedar bird still tucked in her coat pocket. The night was black, the kind of dark that swallowed headlights whole. Her Ford's engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound besides the distant howl of wind through the pines. It was 2 days after the bus surfaced from Lake Huron, and the story was everywhere: local news, Minneapolis stations, even a whisper on NPR. 42 native kids, gone since 1948, found frozen in a yellow school bus under 70 feet of ice. The headlines screamed tragedy, but Nia knew better. This wasn't a storm's fault. This was a cover-up, and she was just scratching the surface. Mabel Blackcrow's trailer glowed faintly, a single bulb flickering on the porch. Nia knocked, her breath fogging in the January cold. The door creaked open, and Mabel stood there, her gray braids swinging, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "You're back," Mabel said, stepping aside. "Find anything?" Nia nodded, slipping inside. The trailer smelled of cedar and coffee, the walls plastered with old photos and newspaper clippings. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the page with the roster from St. Hyme, Nicholas Indian Boarding School. "Found this at the Historical Society," she said, sliding it across the table. "Elise's name is here, Timothy Redfeather too. 42 kids, all listed as missing after that trip. But the county records? They're wiped clean. Like someone didn't want them remembered." Mabel's fingers traced Elise's name, her lips trembling. "She was 9, she said, voice low. Loved drawing birds. Used to say they'd carry her home." She paused, her eyes meeting Nia's. "They said it was a storm, said the bus went off a road. But I never believed it. No wreckage, no search. Just nothing." Nia leaned forward, her voice steady. "Mabel, I found something else. A note in the school files. Says the bus route was changed, signed by someone with the initials BS. You mentioned Sister Bernardine St. Clair. Could that be her?" Mabel's face hardened. "Bernardine. Yeah. She was the head nun at St. Nicholas. Cold as a snake. Kids were terrified of her. Elise used to say she'd lock them in the basement for speaking Ojibwe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. 3 days after the bus vanished, she was gone too. No word, no transfer. Just poof. Nia scribbled that down, her pen digging into the paper. "Gone how?" "Nobody knew," Mabel said. "The priest said she was called to another mission, but I saw her rosary on the ground near the school gate, snapped in half. Never sat right with me." Nia's mind raced. Sister Bernardine, the bus, the kids all erased like they'd never existed, and that notebook from the lake, with its chilling words. "Sister B came last night. She was crying. Said we had to go to the lake." Asterisk. It wasn't adding up. Why would a nun send kids to a lake? Why was there no search? And who was behind those calls, warning her to back off? "I'm gonna keep digging," Nia said, standing. "Something's rotten here, Mabel. I can feel it." Mabel grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You watch yourself, Nia. Whoever did this, they're still out there. I can feel that. Nia nodded, the cedar bird heavy in her pocket. I will. The Duluth Historical Society was a tomb of paper and dust, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. Nia spent the next morning hunched over microfilm readers, her eyes burning from hours of scrolling. She'd already found the 1948 article in the Windridge Gazette, barely a paragraph, buried between ads for tractor parts and church bake sales. School bus, missing in storm, it said, claiming the 42 kids from St. Nicholas were lost in a blizzard on their way to a festival in St. Allen. No follow-up, no investigation, like the world had shrugged and moved on. She dug deeper, pulling every file she could find on St. Nicholas. Most were incomplete, pages torn out, whole years missing. Ruth, the librarian, hovered nearby, her glasses glinting. You're stirring up ghosts, aren't you? She said, half smirking. Those boarding school records are a mess. Church didn't like keeping them. Convenient, Nia muttered, spooling another reel. Anybody ever ask about them before? Ruth's smirk faded. Not in years. Last guy who tried was some grad student in the 70s. Said he got a call telling him to quit. Spooked him bad. Nia's stomach tightened. She thought of the voice on her phone, low and distorted. Stop digging, Whitaker. Asterisk. She shook it off, focusing on the screen. That's when she found ITA maintenance log from St. Nicholas, dated April 11, 1948. The day the bus vanished. It listed bus number 17, driver Walter Broom, route to St. Allen. But scrawled in the margin, in faded ink, was a note, route altered. Special permission via logging road. B.S. asterisk. Nia's pulse quickened. Logging road? There was no logging road on the route to St. Allen. And B.S. again, Bernardine St. Clair. She printed the page, her hand shaking. This was no accident. Someone had sent that bus somewhere it wasn't supposed to go. She was about to leave when Ruth slid a dusty box across the counter. Found this in storage, she said quietly. Was mislabeled. Thought you might want to look. Inside was a mess of paper school reports, receipts, a few photos of kids in stiff uniforms, their faces blank. Nia's breath caught when she saw one name, Timothy Redfeather, age 12, room 6, B. The same name from the roster. And there, tucked in the back, was a yellowed inspection sheet for bus number 17. It listed a last-minute route change, signed with the same initials, BS. Special instructions. Logging road pickup for adults. Asterisk. Adults? Nia frowned. The story was 42 kids, no mention of adults. Who were they, and why were they on that bus? She stuffed the papers in her bag, her mind buzzing. She needed to talk to someone who'd been there, someone who saw the bus leave. Howard Linka lived in a crumbling farmhouse on the edge of Windridge, 30 miles from the reservation. He was 89, half blind, with a voice like gravel. Nia found him on his porch, rocking in a chair that creaked with every sway. His hands were gnarled, clutching a cane carved with bear heads. Heard about the lake, he said before she could speak. Knew it'd come up someday. Nia sat on the porch steps, her notebook open. You worked at St. Nicholas, right? Maintenance? 45 to 72, Howard said, his milky eyes fixed on the horizon. Fixed pipes, shoveled snow, kept the place running. Saw a lot. Too much. What do you remember about April 48? Nia asked. The bus? Howard's rocking stopped. Snow was heavy that day. Too heavy for a trip, I thought. Told Sister Bernardine it wasn't safe. She just nodded, looked, distracted. Like her mind was somewhere else. Nia leaned closer. What about the driver? Walter Broom? Howard's jaw tightened. Quiet fella. Kept to himself. But that morning, he was different. Sweating, checking the tires over and over. Kept patting his coat, like he was hiding something. Didn't wave. When he drove off, always waved before. Nia's pen froze. You saw the kids get on? Howard nodded slowly. All dressed up, little coats, braids, thought they were going to a festival. They were excited, chattering like sparrows. But Walter, he looked like a man headed to his own funeral. Nia's heart pounded. Did you see anyone else? Adults? Maybe? Howard's eyes narrowed. Heard talk of a pickup. 4 adults, they said. Didn't see him myself, but the garage log mentioned it. Strange, though. Nobody talked about it after. Nia scribbled furiously. 4 adults. A logging road. Sister Bernardine's initials. This was no storm crash. This was planned. She thanked Howard, her voice tight, and headed back to her car. The sun was low, painting the fields gold. As she opened her door, she noticed something stuck under her wiper-folded piece of paper, edges brittle with age. She unfolded it, her hands trembling. It was a child's drawing, crude but clear, a bus in water, surrounded by stick figures with X's for eyes. At the bottom, in shaky letters, "They made us go." Asterisk. Nia's breath caught. She looked around, but the road was empty, the field silent. She shoved the drawing in her bag, her skin crawling. Someone was watching her. Back in Duluth, Nia holed up in her apartment, a cramped one-bedroom overlooking Lake Superior. Papers littered her kitchen tableau rosters, articles, the inspection sheet. She pinned the child's drawing to a corkboard, its X's staring back at her. Her phone rang, shattering the silence. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Who was this? The same distorted voice, low and menacing. You're digging where you shouldn't, Whitaker. That lake's got secrets you can't handle. Nia's grip tightened. If you're trying to scare me, it's not working. A chuckle, cold as the wind. You'll see. The line went dead. Nia stared at the phone, her heart hammering. She double-checked her locks, then sat back at the table, the cedar bird in her hand. Its carved eyes seemed to glint in the lamplight. She opened her notebook, writing down every name she had. Bernardine St. Clair, Walter Broom, Elise Blackcrow, Timothy Redfeather. And those 4 adults, who were they? She pulled up a map of Windridge, tracing the route from St. Nicholas to St. Allen. It was a straight shot, 30 miles of paved road, no logging roads nearby. But Howard had mentioned one, and the inspection sheet confirmed it. She found an old county map from the 40s, tucked in a library archive. There it was, a faint line branching off toward Lake Heron, labeled Old Logging Trail. It wasn't on modern maps, erased, like the kids. The next day, Nia drove to the trail. It was overgrown, pines crowding the path, their needles blanketing the ground. She parked and walked, her boots sinking into mud and snow. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that pressed against your chest. She found the trails in near the lake, where a rusted sign leaned against a tree. Private property, no trespassing, 1951, asterisk. Nia froze. 1951. 3 years after the bus vanished. Why mark a forgotten trail? She snapped photos, her camera clicking in the silence. That's when she saw them, faint tire tracks, fossilized in the soil, preserved under layers of pine needles and frost. They matched the width of a school bus. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She answered, her voice sharp. What do you want? You're standing where they died, the voice said, slow and deliberate. Walk away, or you'll join them. Nia spun around, scanning the trees, nothing but shadows. She hung up, her hands shaking, and ran back to her car. The cedar bird was still in her pocket, its edges digging into her palm. She didn't know who was behind the calls, but they knew where she was. And that meant they were close. Nia Whitaker's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, the cedar bird still burning a hole in her pocket. The tire tracks by Lake Heron haunted her, faint scars in the earth, proof that the bus hadn't wandered off in some storm. Someone had driven it there, deliberately, and buried it under 70 feet of ice. The voice on the phone echoed in her head. Asterisk. You're standing where they died. Asterisk. Whoever was watching her knew too much, and they were scared enough to threaten her. That only made her dig harder. It was late January 1995, and Duluth was locked in a deep freeze, the air sharp enough to cut. Nia's apartment was a fortress of papers, now maps, articles, the child's drawing with its chilling X's for eyes. She pinned a logging trail photo to her corkboard, next to the roster from St. Nicholas Indian Boarding School. 42 kids, gone since 1948, their names erased from every official record. But the clues were piling up. Sister Bernardine St. Clair, Walter Broom, a route changed to a logging road, 4 mystery adults. And that sign, private property, 1951, asterisk. 3 years after the bus vanished, someone had claimed that land. Why? Nia's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She hesitated, half expecting another distorted threat. Instead, it was Ruth, the librarian from the Duluth Historical Society. "Got something for you," Ruth said, her voice low, like she was worried someone might overhear. "Found a box in the basement, misfiled under church donations. It's got St. Nicholas Stufflin records, mostly. You want in?" "I'll be there in 20, Nia said, already grabbing her coat. The Historical Society was quiet, the kind of hush that felt like the building itself was holding secrets. Ruth led Nia to a back room, where a cardboard box sat on a table, its edges crumbling. "This was buried under a pile of old hymnals," Ruth said, brushing dust off her hands. "Nobody's touched it in decades." Nia opened the box, her pulse quickening. Inside were ledgers, yellowed and brittle, stamped with the seal of St. Nicholas. Most were routine coal deliveries, staff payrolls, but one caught her eye. A land deed, dated 1951, for a 100-acre plot near Lake Heron. The buyer was Silver Creek Development Corp., a name Nia hadn't heard before. She flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling. There, in black ink, was a signature, Walter Broom. Her breath caught. Walter Broom, the bus driver, supposedly dead in the crash of 1948. Alive 3 years later, signing off on a land deal by the very lake where the bus was found. "This can't be right," she muttered, scanning the document. The deed listed the land as ecologically protected, off limits to public access. No trails, no roads, no nothing. Just a locked gate and a sign. Ruth peered over her shoulder. Silver Creek? Heard that name before. Some shady outfit from the 50s. Bought up half the county, then vanished. Nia's mind raced. Vanished how? "No records after 55, Ruth said. "No taxes, no filings, like they never existed." Nia copied the deed, her hands shaking. This wasn't just about a bus anymore. This was about land, money, power. She needed to know who Silver Creek was and why Walter Broom was tied to them. The next day, Nia drove to the county records office, a gray building that smelled of mildew and coffee. The clerk, a bored guy in his 40s, barely looked up as she requested every file on Silver Creek Development Corp. Hours later, she had a stack of papers, permits, tax records, a single board member list. One name stood out: Lyle Turner, listed as president. Another was Walter Broom, marked as a consultant. Consultant? For what? Driving kids into a lake. She found a news clipping from 1952, tucked in a folder of unrelated land sales. It mentioned Silver Creek buying up undeveloped plots around Windridge, including the land by Lake Heron. The article called it a conservation effort, but Nia's gut screamed otherwise. Conservation didn't involve sinking buses full of kids. Her phone rang as she left the office, the winter sun sinking fast. It was Mabel Blackcrow, her voice tight. "Nia, you need to come to Red Pines, now." "What's wrong?" Nia asked, already heading for her car. "Someone left something at my door," Mabel said. It's Elisa's." Nia's heart skipped. "I'm on my way." The drive to Red Pines was 30 miles of twisting roads, the pines casting long shadows across the snow. Mabel was waiting on her porch, clutching a small cloth bundle. Her hand shook as she handed it to Nia. "Found it this morning," she said. "Right there on the steps." Nia unwrapped the bundle, her breath catching. Inside was a tiny cedar bird, carved with the same crude lines as the one in her car. A name was scratched into its base: Elise. Asterisk. "Where did this come from?" Nia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mabel's eyes were wet. She made these. Used to hide them in her pockets so the nuns wouldn't take them. I don't know who left it, but it's hers. Nia's skin prickled. First the drawing, now this. Someone was sending her a message, but was it a warning or a plea? She tucked the bird in her pocket, next to the other one. Mabel, I found something today. Walter Broom didn't die in 48. He was alive, signing land deals in 51. For a company called Silver Creek. Mabel's face hardened. That bastard drove my sister to that lake. And he walked away? Looks like it, Nia said. And he wasn't alone. Someone named Lyle Turner was calling shots. I'm gonna find out who they were working for. Mabel grabbed her arm. You're kicking a hornet's nest, Nia. Be careful. Nia nodded, but her mind was already racing. She drove back to Duluth, the birds heavy in her pocket. That night, she spread out the Silver Creek files on her table, cross-referencing names and dates. Lyle Turner was a businessman, big in timber and mining, with ties to the church. But one document stopped her cold. A letter, dated 1949, from Turner to Bishop Samuel Carrington, a high-ranking church official. Bishop Carrington, the matter of the children has been handled as discussed. The land is secure, and the school remains undisturbed. We cannot afford interference. The investments are too great. Asterisk. Nia's blood ran cold. Investments? Land? This wasn't just a cover-up. This was a plan, and the kids were in the way. She scribbled Carrington's name, her pen shaking. He was still alive, living in a mansion outside Duluth. She'd need to talk to him, but not yet. She needed more. The next morning, Nia tracked down Laura Abernathy, a woman in her late 70s who lived in a trailer park near Windridge. Laura was the niece of Clarence Abernathy, a name listed as an accountant for Silver Creek. Nia found her in a cluttered living room, surrounded by photos of kids and grandkids. Laura's hand shook as she poured tea, her eyes darting to the windows. My uncle worked for Silver Creek, Laura said, her voice soft. Didn't talk about it much, said it was dirty work. Nia leaned forward, notebook open. Dirty how? Laura hesitated, her fingers twisting a napkin. He said they were buying land nobody wanted, swamps, forests, old native grounds. But it wasn't for building houses. It was something else. Minerals maybe. Timber. He wouldn't say. Got real sick in 53, died fast. Cancer, they said, but it was too quick. Nia's stomach twisted. Did he ever mention a bus, or St. Nicholas? Laura's eyes widened. Once. Said something about a school, kids who saw too much. Said it scared him. He was going to tell someone, but then he got sick. She paused, her voice dropping. I always thought someone shut him up. Nia scribbled that down, her heart pounding. Kids who saw too much. What had they seen? She thanked Laura and left, her mind spinning. As she stepped outside, she noticed a black pickup parked across the street, its engine idling. No plates. She froze, her hand on her car door. The truck pulled away, tires crunching snow, but not before she caught a glimpse of the Drivera man, in a dark coat, his face hidden. Back in her car, Nia's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered, her voice sharp. What do you want? You're asking the wrong questions, the distorted voice said. Keep this up, and you'll end up like Abernathy. The line went dead. Nia's hand shook as she started the engine. She drove to the old logging trail again, unable to stay away. The tire tracks were still there, faint under fresh snow. She walked deeper, the pines closing in, the air thick with silence. That's when she saw a rusted gate, half buried in brush, its lock snapped. Beyond it, a clearing, and in the center, a fresh pile of dirt, like someone had been digging. Nia's heart raced. She snapped photos, her camera shaking. As she turned to leave, she heard a crack, like a branch snapping. She spun around, but the woods were empty. Or so she thought. When she got back to her car, a new note was tucked under her wiper, written in red ink, "You're too close." And beside it, another cedar bird, its wings carved sharp, like it was screaming. Nia Whitaker's heart pounded as she clutched the note, its red ink glaring like dried blood. You're too close." The words burned in her mind, as did the cedar bird left beside it, its carved wings sharp enough to cut. She stood by her car, the old logging trail silent around her, pines looming like sentinels in the January dusk. The air was bitter, 10 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of snow. Whoever left the note knew where she was, what she was chasing. They were scared, and that meant she was getting somewhere. She drove back to Duluth, the cedar birds rattling in her pocket, 3 now, each one a taunt, a warning, a piece of the puzzle. Her apartment was a war zone of papers, maps of Lake Heron, the 1951 land deed from Silver Creek Development Corp., the 1949 letter from Lyle Turner to Bishop Samuel Carrington. The kids from St. Nicholas Indian Boarding School weren't lost in a storm. They were erased, their bus sunk 70 feet under ice to hide something bigland, money, power. And Walter Broom, the driver who was supposed to be dead, had signed off on that land deal 3 years later. Nia's gut screamed conspiracy, and she wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed as she spread out the files. "Unknown number." She answered, her voice sharp as a bladily. "System Blade." "Who is this?" The distorted voice crackled through, low and slow. "You're digging too deep, Whitaker. The lake's got ghosts that don't want to be found." Nia's grip tightened. "I'm not scared of ghosts." A low chuckle. "You should be." The line went dead. Nia slammed the phone down, her pulse racing. She wasn't stopping, not now. She grabbed her coat, stuffed the Silver Creek deed and Turner's letter into her bag, and headed for her car. It was time to confront the one man who might have answers, Bishop Samuel Carrington. The Carrington mansion sat on a hill outside Duluth, a sprawling pile of stone and stained glass that screamed old money. The driveway was lined with snow-dusted pines, and the windows glowed like eyes in the dark. Nia's boots crunched as she approached the door, her heart hammering. She'd called ahead, claiming to be a reporter working on a historical piece about St. Nicholas. The lie got her through the gate, but now, standing on the porch, she felt the weight of what she was about to do. Carrington was a big fish-retired bishop, church heavyweight, and, if Turner's letter was right, a key player in whatever happened to those kids. The door opened, and a man in his late 70s stood there, tall and gaunt, with silver hair and eyes like chipped ice. "Miss Whitaker," Bishop Carrington said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I've been expecting you." Nia's stomach twisted. "Expecting me?" He gestured inside, his smile thin. Word travels fast in Duluth. The mansion's interior was all dark wood and velvet, the air thick with the scent of old books and candle wax. Carrington led her to a sitting room, where a fire crackled in a massive hearth. He sat, steepling his fingers, and motioned for her to do the same. "So," he said, "what brings a reporter to my door at this hour?" Nia didn't sit. She pulled out the 1949 letter and slapped it on the table. "This, your name's on it. Lyle Turner wrote to you about handling the children from St. Nicholas. 42 kids, sunk in a lake. Care to explain?" Carrington's eyes flicked to the letter, then back to her. His face didn't change. "You're chasing ghosts, Miss Whitaker. That letter's a relic, nothing more." "Bullshit," Nia snapped, her voice sharp. "The bus was found, Carrington, 42 kids, dead. And you and Turner were making deals to secure land by Lake Heron. Land that belonged to the Ojibwe." Carrington leaned back, his fingers tapping the armrest. "You're a bold one. But you don't understand what you're dealing with. The church had responsibilities. The land was valuable timber, minerals, water rights. The native families were an obstacle." Nia's blood ran cold. "An obstacle? You mean kids? You sank a bus full of kids to clear the way for your deals." Carrington's eyes narrowed. "You're oversimplifying. Those children were liabilities. They saw things they shouldn't have: meetings, documents, plans. The school was a sensitive operation." Nia's fists clenched. "Sensitive? You mean abusive? You stripped them of their culture, their names, and when they got in the way, you killed them." Carrington stood, his shadow long in the firelight. I didn't kill anyone. I made decisions, hard ones, for the greater good. Nia stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. The greater good doesn't involve drowning kids in a lake. For a moment, Carrington's mask slipped, and she saw something dark in his eyes, not guilt, but calculation. You're in over your head, he said softly. Walk away, or you'll regret it. Nia held his gaze. I'm not going anywhere. Back in her car, Nia's hand shook as she gripped the wheel. Carrington hadn't confessed, but he'd said enough to confirm her suspicions. The kids were a threat, and someone, maybe him, maybe Turner, had ordered them silenced. She needed more proof, someone who knew the inner workings of Silver Creek. That's when she remembered Laura Abernathy's mention of Clarence's old business partner, Gerald Quinn. Quinn lived in a rundown cabin 30 miles west of Windridge, hidden behind a wall of pines. Nia found the place at dusk, the sky a dull gray. The cabin was dark, its windows boarded, but smoke curled from the chimney. She knocked, her breath fogging in the cold. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his 80s, stooped and grizzled, with eyes that glinted like steel. You Whitaker? He rasped, his voice rough as sandpaper. Nia nodded, startled. How'd you know? Quinn snorted, stepping aside. Heard you were sniffing around. Figured you'd show up. Inside, the cabin was a mess of papers and old photos, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Quinn sank into a chair, waving her to another. You're chasing Silver Creek, he said. Bad idea. Nia sat, pulling out the land deed. You were Turner's partner, right? This deed says Walter Broom was alive in '51, signing for Silver Creek, the same guy who drove that bus into the lake. Quinn's eyes flicked to the deed, then back to her. You're quick. Broom was a nobody, just a driver. Did what he was told. Told by who? Nia pressed. You, Turner, Carrington? Quinn lit a cigarette, the flame casting shadows on his face. You don't get it, do you? Silver Creek wasn't just a company. It was a front. Church money, government connections, big players. They wanted that land timber, minerals, the works, worth millions. The natives were in the way. Nia's stomach churned. So you killed 42 kids to clear it? Quinn exhaled a cloud of smoke. I didn't kill nobody. I handled paperwork. But yeah, I knew. We all did. The bus was a solution. Nia's voice shook with rage. A solution? They were kids. Quinn leaned forward, his eyes hard. You think it's simple? The church had plans. Big plans. The government wanted that land for dams, mines, you name it. Those kids saw too much deals, payoffs, men in suits who weren't supposed to be there. They had to go. Nia stood, her fists clenched. Who gave the order? Quinn stubbed out his cigarette. Ask Carrington. He's the one who signed off. Nia's mind raced. Carrington again. She pulled out the 1949 letter. This says you and Turner handled the kids. What does that mean? Quinn's face darkened. Means we cleaned up. Made sure nobody asked questions. Broom drove the bus. Bernardine gave the route. We paid him to disappear. Nia's heart stopped. Sister Bernardine? Quinn nodded. She wasn't happy about it. Cried like a baby, but she followed orders. Then she vanished too. Guess she knew too much. Nia's blood ran cold. Bernardine, Broom, Carrington, Turner, a web of lies and murder. She stood to leave, her voice steady. I'm going public with this, Quinn. The world's gonna know. Quinn's eyes narrowed. You won't make it that far. That night, Nia's apartment felt like a cage. She locked the doors, checked the windows, and spread out her evidence. The deed, the letter, the notebook from the bus. Her phone rang a known number. She let it go to voicemail, but the message played automatically, the distorted voice chilling her bones. You've been warned, Whitaker, one last chance. She deleted the message, her hand shaking. She needed more proof, something airtight. She drove to the county records office at dawn, digging through old files on Silver Creek. Hours later, she found Ida 1948 contract, signed by Carrington, Turner, and a third name, Senator William Pierce. It detailed a land transfer near Lake Heron, to be cleared of all obstacles. Obstacles? The kids. Nia's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mabel. "Nia, someone's been out by the lake, digging, at night. I saw lights." Nia's heart raced. "I'm coming." She reached Lake Heron at midnight, the ice glinting under her headlights. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crunch of her boots. Then she saw a flicker of light under the ice, like a flashlight moving deep below. Her breath caught. Someone was down there, looking for something. She stepped closer, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark. A low rumble shook the ground. An explosion, small but sharp, erupted from the far side of the lake. Ice cracked, and Nia stumbled back, her heart pounding. She ran toward the sound, her beam catching a figure in a dark coat, sprinting into the trees. "Hey!" she shouted, but they were gone. Her phone buzzed. Another message, this time a photo. "Nia, standing by the lake, taken minutes ago." The text read, "Last warning." Nia's blood turned to ice. She clutched the cedar birds in her pocket, their sharp edges digging into her palm. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. And they weren't done. Nia Whitaker's hand shook as she clutched the rusted church key, its cross-shaped head glinting under her apartment's dim lamp. The video she'd received grainy figures in dark coats by Lake Heron, whispering about a greater good played on a loop in her mind. It was January 1995, and Duluth was locked in a brutal cold snap, the air biting at 10 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Her table was a war zone of evidence. Lyle Turner's letter to Sister Bernardine, the 1951 Silver Creek land deed, the child's notebook from the bus, and now the key, maybe to a safe hidden under 70 feet of ice. The explosion by the lake, the break-in at her apartment, the cedar birds left as warning someone was desperate to keep her from the truth. But Nia was done running. She was going to blow this wide open. Her phone buzzed, shattering the silence. It was Mabel Blackcrow, her voice tight. "Nia, the families are ready. We're meeting at Red Pines tomorrow night. You got enough to go public?" Nia's heart raced. "I do. Turner, Carrington, Senator Pierce, they planned it. The kids were killed to clear the land for Silver Creek. I've got the letter, the deed, everything. But there's a safe under the lake. Whatever's in it, they're still trying to hide it." Mabel's voice hardened. "Then we get it, and we make them pay." Nia nodded, though Mabel couldn't see. "Tomorrow, we finish this." She hung up, her eyes on the key. It was her last piece of the puzzle, and she wasn't letting it go. She packed her files, grabbed her coat, and headed to the Duluth Chronicle's office. The newsroom was quiet, most reporters gone for the night. She sat at her desk, typing up her story, every word sharp and deliberate. She'd been chasing this for weeks. 42 native kids from St. Nicholas Indian boarding school, sunk in a bus in 1948 to hide a land grab worth millions. The church, the government, and men like Lyle Turner had blood on their hands, and she was going to name them. As she typed, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered, her voice like steel. "I'm not stopping." The distorted voice chuckled, low and cold. "You think you're untouchable, Whitaker? That key won't save you. It's a trap." Nia's grip tightened. "Then come get me." The line went dead. She kept typing, her fingers flying. She wasn't just writing a story, she was building a bomb. The next evening, Nia drove to Red Pines, the sky heavy with clouds that promised snow. The community center was packed, standing room only. Families from the reservation filled the seats, their faces etched with grief and fury. Mabel stood at the front, her cane tapping the floor, her gray braid swinging. Nia recognized other face elders who'd lost siblings, parents who'd lost children, all tied to St. Nicholas. A new face stood out, Tina Redfeather, a woman in her 60s, her eyes fierce. She was Timothy Redfeather's sister, one of the kids on the bus. Nia took the podium, her notes trembling in her hands. She'd spent the day copying every document, sending backups to a lawyer friend in Minneapolis. If anything happened to her, the truth would still get out. She cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the weight in her chest. 42 kids from St. Nicholas didn't die in a storm, she said, her words cutting through the room. They were murdered. Lyle Turner, Bishop Samuel Carrington, and Senator William Pierce planned it. The land around Lake Heron was worth millions: timber, minerals, water rights. The kids saw something they shouldn't have, and they were silenced to protect a deal. The room went still, every eye on her. She held up Turner's letter, her voice rising. "This says it all." Turner told Sister Bernardine to send the bus to the lake. It was no accident. They sank it, with 42 kids inside, and called it a storm. The church covered it up, the government looked the other way, and Silver Creek got rich. Mabel's voice broke the silence. "My sister, Elise, was 9. She carved birds to dream of home. They took her from me." Tina Red Feather stood, her hands shaking. "My brother, Timothy, was 12. He wanted to be a teacher. They stole his future." The room erupted, voices rising in grief and rage. Nia held up a hand, her heart pounding. "Tomorrow, I'm going public. The Chronicle's running the story, but there's a safe under the lake. I think it holds the last piece proof of who else was involved. We're getting it out." A man in the back stood, his face weathered. "We're with you, Nia, all the way." Nia nodded, her throat tight. "Then let's do this." That night, Nia couldn't sleep. She sat in her apartment, the key in her hand, the video of the figures by the lake replaying in her mind. They have to go. For the greater good. Asterisk. She'd sent the video to a tech friend, hoping they could clean it up, identify the voices. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. The lake at night, a faint glow under the ice. Someone was down there, right now. She grabbed her coat and drove to Lake Heron, the key burning in her pocket. The lake was quiet, the ice glinting under her headlights. She stepped out, her flashlight sweeping the shore. That's when she saw in a hole in the ice, freshly cut, with divers' lines trailing into the water. Her heart stopped. They were after the safe. She crept closer, her boots silent on the snow. A black van was parked nearby, no plates, its engine still warm. She snapped photos, her camera shaking. Then she heard Ida low hum, like machinery underwater. A shadow moved in the trees, and she froze. A figure in a dark coat, face hidden, stood watching her. Before she could move, a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "Don't," a voice hissed. It was a man, his face half covered by a scarf. "They'll kill you." Nia pulled free, her flashlight on him. "Who are you?" He stepped back, his eyes darting. "I was there. In 48, I saw what they did." Nia's breath caught. "You saw the bus?" He nodded, his voice low. "I was a kid, sneaking around the school. Saw Bernardine crying, talking to men in suits. They said the kids had to go. Something about papers, deals. I ran, kept quiet. Been hiding ever since." Nia's heart raced. "What's in the safe?" He hesitated, then slipped a ring from his finger, its cross matching the key. "Proof. Names, contracts, payoffs. The real players." Before she could ask more, headlights flashed. The van roared to life, tires, crunching snow. The man vanished into the trees, leaving the ring in her hand. Nia ran to her car, her pulse pounding. She drove to Red Pines, the ring and key heavy in her pocket. The next morning, Nia met with the families again, this time at the lake. Divers from the state were there, prepping to retrieve the safe. Mabel stood beside her, her face fierce. Tina Red Feather joined them, clutching a photo of Timothy. The air was thick with tension, the wind howling across the ice. The divers went down, their lines taut. Hours passed, the crowd growing restless. Then a shout went up, "We got it." A crane groaned, pulling a rusted safe from the water, its cross-shaped lock glinting. Nia handed the key to the lead diver, her hands shaking. "Open it." The lock clicked, and the safe creaked open. Inside were papers, sealed in plastic, pristine despite decades underwater. Contracts, ledgers, letters sewn signed by Senator Pierce, detailing payoffs to church officials and state bureaucrats. Another, from Carrington, ordering the removal of the kids. And a list, names of men in suits, government officials, all tied to Silver Creek. Nia's voice trembled as she read aloud. This is it. The truth. The crowd roared, their grief and rage spilling over. Mabel grabbed her hand. You did it, Nia. The Chronicle ran the story the next day. Front page. Massacre at Lake Heron. The truth behind the lost children. Nia stood at a press conference, cameras flashing, her voice steady. The church, the government, and Silver Creek killed 42 kids to steal land. We have proof letters, contracts, a safe full of secrets. It's time for justice. The room erupted, reporters shouting questions. Nia stepped back, letting Mabel and Tina speak. Mabel's voice was soft but fierce. My sister, Elise, is home now. Her name will be remembered. Tina held up Timothy's photo. They tried to erase us. They failed. The trial came fast. The evidence undeniable. Carrington, now in his 80s, faced conspiracy and fraud charges. Turner's estate and Silver Creek's remnants were dragged into court. The nation watched, horrified, as the truth spilled out a systematic effort to erase Native kids for profit. That night, the families gathered by Lake Heron for a memorial. The ice was still, the sky clear. Mabel spoke first, her voice steady. Elise Blackcrow. One by one, the families named their lost Timothy, Sarah, Joseph. 40, 2 names, ringing in the cold. Nia stood back, her heart full. The fight wasn't over, but the truth was out. The kids were home.